All right, so since I don't have a co-host today, I am going to try to handle some frequent questions that we get and some feedback that I've received on some of our former podcasts in no particular order. So I'm just going to pick things and go in the order I feel like, since I don't have a co-host to keep me in line. I don't have an adult to adult me. Like what does an adult do? Anyway, what are the toughest parts of being a PM? I get that often from other Scrum Masters that I work with, especially ones that feel they have the chops for being a PM, but haven't moved into that space yet or haven't been. So backstory time, right? I work in a consultancy, and in a consultancy, you have the opportunity to move into other areas, especially other areas where you have an agile coach that kind of looks out for you, where you have somebody that watches out for the contract. It's good for anyone in the agile space to keep up on their skill set. And I also say it's good for anyone who's a CSM, who's going through the CSM training, to also go through the PO training. The PO training and the CSPO training are very, very close together. So if you go through one, you're not going to feel you got a lot of value out of both, but you need to go into the same mindset. But if you get the chance to work in a consultancy, or if you do work in a consultancy and you get the chance to kind of ride along with a product manager, I would definitely encourage you to take the opportunity to ride along with a product manager, because the toughest parts of product management or product ownership, I feel, are things that you can't really get out of the Scrum guide. And maybe you can get it out of your day-to-day experiences as a Scrum Master on a team. Maybe you can kind of absorb it, especially if you step in and do a lot of business analysis type tasks. The toughest parts of what I see as a product owner or a product manager's job are the following. It is aligning stakeholders on the problems and not the solutions. Like, that would be the first thing that I would throw out there as the toughest part of your job. I mean, a lot of times what I see the business pushing product managers towards is having their teams just become a feature factory. Hey, I really need you to build this, and they'll give you a solution. I was on a project one time, and the company that I was at was a relatively small company, and at that relatively small company, I would say probably easily 60% of that company's revenue came from their one large customer. And in the situation where you have one large customer, you end up basically dropping what you're doing and servicing that one customer whenever they ask you for things to be resolved or for improvements. And the issue was that they would, at that company, I happened to be their first product manager, so it was a little bit different than an established company, an established product management group. But in that instance, I constantly had to push back on the other executives and other departments in the company in order to dig deeper into what the customer asked them for. Sales was a big thing. I always had coming with things that customers wanted before they would sign contracts. So we would have to develop features based on basically a customer we didn't even have yet, a strategic market point that could help us enter into a different market that we weren't in. And that's fine. You know, I'm all about helping sales, but being a product manager is the difficult part. In being a product manager, I feel, is connecting with all the different departments and connecting with the executive leadership to understand where the company's going, because sales as an example, where every single department is going may not match where the company's going, because it may be easier to push in different directions. For example, if the company wants to push in direction A and sales finds it's really easy to sell in market B, then we obviously have a miscommunication along the way, right? Maybe sales is right in that instance. We need to bubble it back up to the leadership to redirect to the B market rather than the A market. You know, I don't really know, but you're going to deal with that as a product manager. The other things that you're going to deal with is you're going to have features that are asked for by different customers or different internal stakeholders. I mean, they're all stakeholders to me. So customer or internal VP or internal other product manager, they're all stakeholders, meaning that they're not directly inside of your teams that you're working with, but you're going to have to prioritize features that your team or teams are building alongside each other. So you're going to have to gather statistics and facts. I would say I would start with, actually, I would wheel it back to say you're going to have to gather facts. And you're going to have to present these facts when you talk to the stakeholders. Usually in my career, it's been getting executive buy-in. That's where, in my career, I've always rolled up to an executive at some sort, or a panel of executives, and you end up having to not really justify. Justify is really it's not really a great word choice, but you end up having to kind of prove why you're deciding to prioritize certain features over other features. And that's fine. That's part of the job too. If you're the decision maker, you're accountable for the decision. So you should be able to speak on why you made certain decisions and why you deprioritize other features. But the tricky situation, and the Scrum Masters and the team members, the development team members, this is kind of where you make all your money as a product manager. They don't have to deal with the customer when the customer is disappointed because you're not working on the feature, or because this neat new idea that they came up with won't bring the company any revenue, and you decide to prioritize it. You have to land decision with the customer in a way that doesn't turn them off. So there's some political skill involved that maybe the other members of the team or the Scrum Master doesn't have to deal with, and that is a tough part of being a PM that isn't necessarily handled by any training or guidance that they give you. You have to kind of learn that along. The next thing is building consensus. So as a product manager, like I said, you will receive from every direction. You will receive input on what you need to build and when you need to build it, and who it is the most important to, obviously who is not most important to, and you'll have to kind of sync this with the company's direction and your roadmap and other things. But the building of consensus, that is not something that is written down anywhere, like the process of building consensus. So it is likely you'll be a product manager, potentially a product owner. Let's pretend you're a product owner for a second, and you have one team, or maybe two teams, one or two teams, and you want to build a feature. That feature, if you're in a smaller organization, you probably have an advantage here in that you'll be more agile, you'll be able to move quicker. If you're in a larger organization, you will likely have to pass that feature by development leads or department leads who want their input, and they want to put their input into it. Maybe test leads will want to put their input in, and they'll have things that they're asking for. For example, in a project that I worked on, we were migrating from one particular product platform, an older one, legacy platform, to a newer technology. Basically the same features, but in a newer technology. And I had technical leads for the old technology and technical leads for the new technology, and both of which had to be engaged before sign off was given to move forward with the roadmap. Now, as a product, I was ultimately responsible for the new features that the company was trying to bring online. But in that particular instance, I had project managers also inserting themselves because they had roadmaps and milestones all their own, where they wanted to decommission a certain product by a certain date because there's costs involved in maintaining environments and costs involved in maintaining teams. And all of that's important. Not trying to turn this a P&L type of discussion, but all of that's important. But the fact that they had these predetermined dates doesn't really help when you're the product manager at the time trying to decide what to build in what order. In that instance, we had a product to take offline. So basically we had to replicate the features that product that was in production allowed customers to do. We had to replicate the features that it did. We had to insert the new functionality of the new product along the way. So basically we were rebuilding another product. And then we had a date in which the leadership wanted basically everything done by. And we negotiate along the way based on, this is what we can do. If your date is we want to get all of this old product done and decommissioned over time, this is what we're looking at, and this is what we can do on that timeline. If you want these new features, we're going to have to extend the timeline. We had a back and forth. But the normal back and forth aside that you have, and other companies have project managers and manage scope this way with deadlines and deliverables and milestones and phase gates, whatever corporate jargon they put to it. But they don't really tell you how to build. To take us back to the point, please do. To take us back to the point, the building of consensus between the department heads or the technical product expertise or the individual team product owners, in case you're the product manager and there are several teams, like a very large initiative, for example, that is sort of the magic in product management, is how to build consensus. So the way you would build consensus, and again, this is off the top of my head, the way you would build consensus, I think, is to leverage your relationships with the technical leads. Now, if you don't have any relationships, you have to build those relationships, okay? And this is the instance where your Scrum Master comes into play, because you need to leverage everyone that you can to have the one-on-ones you need with those people to build those relationships. If you have no relationships at all, you're really climbing uphill to get your day-to-day accomplished, especially at a large organization where people have a lot of veto power and own resources in a matrix environment. I could definitely see it being a challenge, but as a product manager, you definitely have to leverage everyone that you have access to, and the support staff in that instance being the Scrum Master or project manager, or maybe another product manager. Maybe there's an old product manager for the outgoing product. In my case, where you're trying to decommission an old product, maybe they have a product manager who used to work on that who moved on, and you can leverage their contacts and relationships. It's really a matter of influence more than it's a matter of you gaining expertise. Now, if you're the individual who built the old product and you're moving over to build a new product, and you have your foot in both worlds, obviously that would be the best scenario, because now you have all the expertise on both sides of the fence. That would be great. Very rarely that I have seen it's been that way, though. The final thing I will say on product management that has been challenging for me is trying to shift the focus from building features and having your teams purely become a feature factory. Because once the teams that I have been on successfully prove that they can build features, usually what happens is you get pulled into building more and more and more features, and you basically become a feature factory. That's the hot buzzword, feature factory. The trap of being a feature factory is you're making a lot of people happy, but you may or may not be advancing the future of the product. That would be the problem with being a feature factory. It's super easy to get lost in building the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and forgetting about the future direction of the company and the product as it relates to the company. I feel that who you take your input in that instance is super important, and who you bounce your roadmap off of is super important as well. I mean, the roadmap sessions, I've said this before in previous videos, I don't want to go back to the roadmap sessions that often, because going back to the roadmap sessions sort of is like a hard reset for your teams, and you don't really want to do that, because it kind of disrupts the cadence that your teams are moving forward. You kind of just want to drop new things into the backlog and let the teams absorb them and kind of kick them down the road and figure out what's involved in them as they kind of examine the features. Especially if you're at scale level, you're a product manager and you're interfacing with customers, and you have one or more product owners who work for you, carrying out the direction that you're setting. This is a really important thing. It's important for you to set out a clear vision moving forward, and the features that you lay out in that clear vision should kind of move forward with it. The only other thing, I'm struggling with this now in my project that I'm on now, is they did not have a very clear way of including the business focused features they're developing and the technical oriented features that they need to do in order to get there. For example, the business knows that it wants to have this great new feature for customers to use, but the technical leads, like the development lead, for example, expects that the user base now is 1,000 users, 1,000 concurrent users, for example. And once this product rolls out and the old product is decommissioned, they expect it to go from 1,000 to 10,000, and they want to load test it up at 100,000, even though they're not 100% sure that the application will ever get 100,000 concurrent users, but it may. So we have certain stages. The first stage is 1,000 concurrent users. The second stage is 10,000 concurrent users. The third stage is 100,000. Now, we can argue back and forth about whether 100,000 concurrent users is actually a relevant goal, most certainly. But those milestones of performance testing need to be rolled into the product roadmap so that the teams are performing those tests to see how the application performs. And if the application doesn't perform well, then we need to make some change depending on actual use of the application, which means we need some actual operations statistics to be published. We need those things need to be available for us. They can't exist in a vacuum. We need regular access to the real-time statistics, and we need to see it like this. I'm starting to dip into the concept of DevOps, where your developers are involved in operations, and we have a regular operations person involved in our plannings and whatnot. But I'm gonna turn the wheel so we kind of drive away from that for a second, because I don't want to get too far out of just the tough parts of being a PM. Okay, pivot. Question number 2. Should pick that one at random. Should Scrum teams share ceremonies? I think they're called Scrum events now. Thank you very much. All right, elitism out of the way. Should Scrum teams share ceremonies? I probably have 2 different answers for this based on if I'm a product owner or a Scrum Master. I don't know which one I should start with. I probably should start with being Scrum Master. In projects that I have been a part of, ongoing teams and efforts that I've been a part of, when all the teams were delivering from the same product backlog, then it was totally cool to share the sprint review. That was the one thing that was the one event that I put together very quickly when I was on that project, that we were not sharing when I started, that I moved to have the teams share together. Because on that project, it was one single product. Now, it was the product absorbed from different databases all around an organization. That was a data warehousing type project. But regardless of where you were getting data from, the output and the way they were using it, it didn't really matter to the users, because the users were basically, for example, the users were looking at one dashboard, let's say. I'm really, really simplifying the output of that project. But the users were seeing a dashboard, and the fact that you were getting data or you were doing things that interface with different systems didn't really matter. The outcome was what mattered to the users, which is, can they see a cross-section of data from the different systems that the company had access to, or that the company owned, the different data sources that the company owned. If you were doing a demo, it didn't matter so much that you could access, you could prove that you can get data from those systems. It mattered that you did get the data from the systems and then flattened it and then added it to their particular dashboards that they see on a regular basis. That was what would wow the user. So on that project, I was a sort of a program manager over several teams rather than an individual team level. I mean, I was kind of both, to be honest, because that project was kind of all over the place. So anyway, to get back to the point, that particular project that I'm talking about, they shared sprint reviews first. I was not on that project long enough to move all of their plannings to some sort of scale planning. What I ended up doing with that project was I moved them toward a Nexus style sprint planning, where there was a scaled sprint planning for the teams, the individual teams in that program planned. And in the Nexus style sprint planning, what we did was we had the product owner, the chief product owner, actually in that instance, we had the chief product owner, and we had the leads from each team. And we would decide what we were taking on, and then the leads would bring back to the individual teams sprint planning, and they would plan in depth the higher level objectives or features that were being absorbed. So in that instance, we had separate sprint plannings. Basically, we had a higher level sprint plannings that they had higher level sprint planning that not everybody was involved in, and then we had individual sprint plannings. And after all the individual sprint plannings were done, we sort of had a sync up afterwards to kind of show, this is what the teams have committed to. Honestly, I don't know if I would do that again. I think I would rather have the efficiency of having everyone in the room if I could do that project over again. To be honest, I would rather have everyone in the room. The issue with having everyone in the room is usually you'll have somebody rock star in from the business and say, oh, there's a lot of people in this room. We seem to be burning a lot of productivity. I mean, you need to be able to, as a product owner, usually when somebody rolls in with that attitude, the product owner and the Scrum Master or the Scale Scrum Master or the RTE or whoever is coordinating that event, you need to jump on that individual as soon as you see them kind of giving you that eye about, ooh, there's a lot of people, I don't know, whatever, to bring them in and help them understand the reason to have that many resources in the room for some kind of scale planning or big room planning, or you want to call it. I kind of think if I were to do that project again, I would do a big room planning where we all agree on how we're going to break down the features, and all of the teams basically talk to each other along the way on what they can divide up and how they're going to divide it up, and everyone's involved, or at least everyone is listening to the conversation. I definitely saw gaps. The leads basically split up the feature into what team A can accomplish and team B can accomplish and team C can accomplish to make up the whole of that feature, because it's one feature when it goes to production. It's not split up into subcomponents. The users aren't using it like that. Anyway, I can't really see a backlog refinement being combined unless it's scaled. I mean, you're going to have large features that are proposed by like a chief product owner that multiple product owners have to decide, well, I'll do this part and you'll do that part. But a project that I was on very recently, actually, you had multiple products in the program, and the products, the teams that were implementing the stories for those products, a team would do 50% product A, 50% product B, and then another team would do 50% product B and 50% product C. So you had 3 products, 2 teams, and actually you had like 5 products and 4 teams or something like that. And depending on the urgency of the features being delivered, the teams would kind of jump in and out, and it was a very confusing program to be part of, especially when you're on the outside coming in for the first time, joining the project for the first time, because you're really not sure what products these teams are producing. And it was very confusing until we started separating, say, these teams, this team A and team B only works on product A, and then we started segmenting so that the people delivering the products were segmented, and that did help that team pick up speed. But it was very difficult because you had to realign. The leads were aligned with products; they weren't aligned with teams, so they really didn't care. They didn't have a stake in what people were on what teams. And project management, what people are on what teams, and what teams have to coordinate to align to deliver certain features by a deadline that they've set. Project management is at such a high level where they don't care about that kind of stuff. So as a Scrum Master or a product owner, you really have to step in to say, look, I need a stable team. And you really need to go out on a limb to say this is what you need in order to be successful. As I think a lot of times Scrum Masters can spot that stuff. They can spot that with the given team structure, or with the given fact that my team supports 3 products or multiple products, we're gonna have a hard time being successful. And Scrum Masters can say that, but you really need your product owner to take that up to the management and up to their program or product management to kind of make the case, hey, let's dedicate this one team to this one product. And even if you split the team into a smaller segment, let's say you have a team of like 8 people or 9 people, 3 people go over here and 5 people go over here, and you're still the product owner for both of the teams, but the smaller team works on your smaller product and the larger team works on your other product. So if you're a product owner and you own 2 products, basically, just segment them so that your teams aren't kind of cross-pollinating. Because other things that I've seen is product owners who are trying to save their time. This is another thing. It's kind of important to point out, but only a tangent, connected to this main topic by a tangent. I see product owners trying to protect and guard their time, which is perfectly valid because product owners, product managers, their time is super valuable to them because they're trying to get in front of customers as much as they can. They will try to save as much time as possible, and one of the things that I've dealt with is a new product owner. For example, a new product owner took over for me one time, and he said, "Hey, why do we have 2 teams of 5? Why don't we just have, a larger team of 10, and then I don't have to spend, 30 minutes of my day potentially in stand-ups. I'll just have one stand-up that's 15 minutes rather than 2 stand-ups back-to-back that are 15 minutes, and then I don't have to do a refinement for Team A and a refinement for Team B. I don't have to do this." And I told him the jury is not out on smaller teams are more efficient. That research is well documented, and you can go read about why the ideal team size lends itself to 4 or 5, 6 people rather than 10, 11, 12 people. But if you're not going to read the research or you're not convinced of that, let's consider that dedicating one team to one product and another team to another product cuts down the interference, the social interactions on one team. Where when you do a refinement, let's say you have 5 people that work on product A and 3 people that work on product B. I know I just reversed them. When you're talking about product A, those 5 people are going to be engaged, and those 3 other people that are on the call are not going to be interested. They're going to be disengaged. And you can make the case, I'm going to have both products in my sprint, but maybe I just do refinements with half my team because they're the only ones that are involved in product A. And yeah, you could do that, but at the point where you basically are splitting your refinements, why not split the rest of your events at that point and just have 2 separate teams? I mean, it makes a lot of sense for just keeping the amount of social connections that need to happen on the team at a very low point. The lower amount of connections that need to happen or communications that need to happen in between team members, the more efficient the team can be. Probably should go out and find some research and surveys on this matter and post them in the links below when I'm talking about the subject. But the summary of where I'm going with this is the smaller the team, the more dedicated to one single product that team is, the more efficient that team will be. So you can certainly trade off efficiency to save you one individual time as a product manager, but I don't know if I would make that choice. And when faced with that previously, I've never made the choice to make that trade-off because I think it's self-defeating in the end. From a product perspective, I want my team dedicated and thinking about the future of that one product and not having other things filter into kind of a crosstalk that happens when you have team members that are working on different things, different products, different activities, completely different initiatives, basically. I would seek to avoid that.